Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film The Neon Demon. The Neon Demon is a very stylized movie about the fashion industry and modeling within the fashion industry within LA, commenting on fashion and beauty and fame, while calling it kind of fake in the ideas behind beauty and the dirtiness behind beauty, while perfecting a very beautiful stylized image. And it's a very divisive film. For everything I probably like about this movie, there's probably someone else who doesn't like it on those exact same points. It's the kind of film that I guess I've gotten used to with Nicholas Winding Refn after Drive. This is more of Only God Forgives, although it seems to be a lot more enjoyable and cultish and weirder, and I kind of don't know if this is really a film for mainstream audiences. I don't think it's a film that wants to be for mainstream audiences. It both is for cinephiles and people who love movies, and also a film that absolutely repels them, and I think Nicholas Winding Refn really likes that, but I think he also likes the fact that he has your attention, which I don't know how many more of these kind of weird movies he can make where we'll all still have it. But as of right now, he still does for some reason. I guess mostly because of Drive, at least for American audiences, although Valhalla Rising and Bronson had a lot to do with that as well. I think the thing with Winding Refn's more recent works is they do like to be very beautiful. They do like to be very precise, and it's interesting. I guess this film is almost like using the stylization to almost say something about beauty, which I don't think he's trying to say something about his own kind of stylized artistic intent and the way he makes movies, which would maybe be a little meta and interesting. But I think what he's trying to do is kind of make a very cultish, simpler kind of blood and black lace, kind of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls kind of cult movie, and shoot it like it's this precise master filmmaker type of picture with all the meaning in the frames that you could analyze and pick apart. But it's still, if you look at the basic structure and plot of it, it's kind of like a simpler cult movie in itself. And he's kind of taking that whole idea, which is kind of the beginning of Blockbuster and what Spielberg and Lucas would do, but doing it in a kind of avenue that no one would ever take it, and giving you a complete unique vision. But I think while I was watching it, I was still like, well, yes, it's amazing that you have a unique vision. I always find it interesting, and I always respect all of his movies, particularly these ones with a unique vision, but I don't automatically love them as much. And I think when I'm watching The Neon Demon, as much as I like its kind of weird version of what it's doing, I wonder how much of his weird version of what he's doing will overstay its welcome. A young aspiring model, Jessie, who's played by Elle Fanning, who has come to LA to be a model, and she does her first photo shoot, her like bleeding on a couch and stuff. I don't know, this movie's weird. So then she signs with a major agency run by Christina Hendricks and starts becoming a big model because everyone thinks she looks so gorgeous and unique, and big photographers and fashion designers want to work with her. And as she's rising up, she makes friends with this kind of trio of this one makeup artist and these two models, and how they kind of both support her and hate her as she naturally rises through the fashion industry effortlessly, and everyone else hates her for doing that, as it seems like she's doing it just overnight and taking all the jobs that they once had, or at least in their mind. I've talked about this before, but I think it's something that I thought about after watching this film, and it's that if you're someone, let's say, who's just gotten into movies and started to understand directors and auteur theory, and an auteur that I don't think you would get as much as you would 5 years ago would be Nicholas Winding Refn, and I think he would maybe be someone who you're just missing. Neon Demon isn't the kind of film that you're going to see and want to watch all his movies. It just isn't. And it's the kind of movie that I think if you were a new film goer, you might eventually get to Drive, and then you'd want to see all those other stuff like most of us did. Some people before, but you know what I'm saying. But I think Neon Demon is that kind of very divisive, weirdly, very auteur theory, auteurist, I guess, driven kind of film. And in some ways that's beautiful, and it's amazing that a filmmaker can still do that in this day and age and can make such a weird, bizarre kind of movie. One of the coolest things about art is seeing different visions. But I kind of look at this as like, dude, look, you gotta not do this anymore. You gotta do something else, or no one's gonna care about you in like a year. I love this movie in a certain regard. I actually find it a lot more fun than Only God Forgives. Not that I mean, a lot of things are more fun than Only God Forgives. Although I like Only God Forgives, and I like every movie of his I have seen. I haven't actually seen all of them, which is a mistake. I should actually get up on that maybe by the next one, although I said that with the last one and the last one before that. But I think he has this preciseness to his direction and how stylized he is. And it's interesting interesting that he would want to comment on fashion, because that always seems, especially the way it's portrayed, so precise and so much about beauty, and feels like a lot of his images and almost the way he directs is more about the mood and the atmosphere rather than the narrative. Apparently there are whole sections in this film, particularly ones that you will definitely be talking about at the end, that were kind of improvised, or he just kind of went with it and it happened, which is kind of surprising considering how precise his cinematography feels. And it's interesting, even the way he shoots feels very Winding Refn, although in his past 3 movies he's worked each time with a different cinematographer, which, to be honest, I was shocked by, because I know the cinematographer on this film was Natasha Breyer. Someone had told me it was the person who shot Only God Forgives, and I hadn't looked. I would think that, and that's not a diss on that cinematographer. I actually think it's amazingly well shot, and there's a lot of technical aspects of this film that are probably some of the best of the year, and maybe one of the best shot films about fashion I've ever seen. But there are worse shot films about fashion I've seen that I probably enjoy more and will watch again and will have fun with. And I think Neon Demon isn't that kind of movie. It's kind of like this and Only God Forgives are like cinematic finds. They're like treasures that you're like, oh my god, I can't believe this weird vision of a movie exists, but I am not fascinated enough with it. I'd probably watch this again over Only God Forgives, but I find it interesting having a stylized film say about beauty and fame and how it changes people and how people can literally go after people and how it changes your experience and your worldview and how she gets kind of swallowed up by this industry. And I found all that very interesting, especially the way he did it, but it does feel like kind of a giallo or Blood and Black Lace, which this film definitely references, particularly at the end. And if you've seen Blood and Black Lace, you'll get it, and if you don't know, then you'll know. I find it just more of a film that I just liked wash over me, but it wasn't a film I was as captivated by, but I don't think it wanted to be. So it's like I feel like I got all of this movie and how wonderfully beautiful it was, and the amazing score by Cliff Martinez, which is probably one of his better scores. And I liked watching all this like neon and the glow of it, and you could really analyze like every shot of this, but that doesn't make it a better movie because you can do a deep dive into some of the imagery that's going on throughout it. And if you like a film that's more visually pleasing and odd and experimental and playing with narrative in a more cultish, strange way and not being as literal, I think in some ways he's very experimental and different in what he's doing. But I think what it's saying about particularly models and modeling and I guess femininity is odd, but it's kind of like he fetishizes women, and he particularly fetishizes the fashion industry and isn't even really trying to be kind of fashion in such a way. The stylization of it feels almost like how Russ Meyer fetishized bigger breasted women, almost feels like how he fetishizes women and beauty in general. It does remind me of Russ Meyer in that way, but in the Russ Meyer movies there was such a sense of empowerment, and I don't find that in Neon Demon. It honestly felt like some of this stuff is stuff Nicholas Winding Refn would maybe jerk off to. It's kind of an odd thing because I don't think a lot of people show women in such a way. I definitely think there's a lot of media of people fetishizing women, obviously, but in the way that he does it, you don't really see that as much anymore. And it did feel like cheaper entertainment shot like an amazing makeup commercial, and I don't mean that in a bad way. And I understand people are like, oh, he's ripping off Lynch and stuff, like whatever. That doesn't necessarily bother me. I'm kind of fine with how he uses his style because it just looks like such an amazing image. It's kind of like the only thing you're really taking from it. Winding Refn works best with big personalities who he kind of hampers down, particularly with Christina Hendricks and especially Keanu Reeves, so I think it kind of steals the movie, for me at least. I thought he was really funny. If you ever didn't really think Keanu Reeves was an actor, his small role in this kind of proves differently. Elle Fanning, I kind of at first was wondering why they didn't get like a Cara Delevingne or somebody who was more of a model to do a movie like this, but apparently, according to my wife at least, Elle Fanning does more kind of high fashion stuff than I'm aware of. As you can probably tell, I don't know a ton about fashion. I liked Elle Fanning. I guess her whole point of her role isn't to be as big as everyone else, so I guess she was playing it effectively. In terms of Winding Refn protagonist, she's probably the one I like the least. I'm kind of not really following her story as much as I'm following the story itself, but I guess maybe that's kind of the point. She has the look down. It wasn't that she wasn't pretty or something like that. I thought she was fine. I guess maybe I just kind of like the novelty of maybe just a model playing it, but apparently Elle Fanning is kind of a model of sorts, so I guess it's fine. I'm just being nitpicky. And I like the two other girls who play models, Bella Heathcote and Abby Lee. I thought do an interesting, like kind of creepy job. They do kind of have this really great antagonist performance. When you look at Winding Refn, he's somebody who definitely enjoys odder, stranger films, but he's become this very technically gifted director. And that seems to be such a narrative with directors in the post-70s way, is that they kind of grew up with trash, but ended up being very technically skilled, so when they want to tell a story, they're influenced by things that were never shot this well ever. Although I think a lot of the influence of this film is Bava, and Bava was very stylized, but Bava was a lot more interested in entertaining, and I think maybe the odd thing about Neon Demon is how it's the kind of film that would be more entertaining and cultish, and would be played with the sound off in a gay bar, which, to be honest, Neon Demon probably will at some point. So the kind of movie that used to be maybe in the 90s or early 2000s that you'd be like, what's this weird cult film? And I think that's kind of what he's doing. He's taken a cultish, weirder film and made it into kind of this high art, fashion-y thing, which is kind of how culture and art usually works. What used to be yesterday's trash becomes the next generation's high art, and he manages to do that very effectively. And I think that speaks a lot about beauty and how beauty evolves and changes and such. But it is kind of an odd way to show fashion in such a stylized way, but in kind of such a strange, kind of weird world. Like, LA's a major city and it looked practically deserted. It looked like this strange ghost town that not many people knew about, but had this huge fashion industry. Now that I'm thinking about it, Elle Fanning's kind of ghostly look works more with it. But I like kind of how it's almost very influenced by like the atmosphere of a horror movie, but isn't a horror movie. I mean, kind of is, but it doesn't feel like a horror movie throughout most of it. But that atmosphere felt like she's like transforming, like there's evil going on throughout it, and there's really not too much evil throughout it. You know, it's kind of simple. Girl goes through story until like maybe closer to the end, or not. No spoilers. It's interesting what he does with ambiance, and it's interesting how odd this film really is, because I don't think a lot of fashion films would be as influenced by horror and cheaper films and giallos. And it shows a director who is willing to take all his influences and shake them up and do something new with it. This is only real film that's led by more of a female cast and a female protagonist even. I think that shows a different way to kind of take his world. But I think this all comes back to, like, as interesting as I want to talk about this vision, and it's kind of a nice, like, kind of movie lover thing to talk about this director's weird vision and how cool it is and how he made this cool, like, different movie, and nobody makes movies like this, so I should just respect it because auteurism and shit. As much as I like this movie and enjoy it and the context I am in with Winding Refn, I can like Neon Demon. But I think the thing that I keep thinking about with this film is that if I was a 15-year-old kid and I'm getting into movies, right, and I'm starting to understand who directors are and who are the cool directors and who are directors I should look out for and who people are talking about and reading reviews, you should not see this movie first. And that's not to say all films should be everyone's first movie of that director, but I think this is the kind of film where if you're not aware of him, you're going to be turned off because you'll be like, what the fuck is this nonsense? I like how divisive it is. He has pushed this like weird avenue as far as it can go. At this point, I'm still interested and I still kind of actually like it. Maybe I like it a little more, but I honestly would be kind of disappointed if his next movie is just this weird, cold, divisive kind of thing. Like, I want to have the thing that I love so much about Drive, which I haven't watched Only God Forgives since I saw it in theaters. I'm not sure I'll see Neon Demon again. I will see Drive again, probably this year. I've seen Drive a lot of times. I'm not saying he has to make Drive. I'm just saying the promise we feel from him is diminishing because, like, when I see there's certain scenes in this where I'm like, oh my god, if he did a big action movie, if he did this, and they kind of let him have the directorial control he has over Neon Demon, that would be an amazing film, or at least such a stylized, interesting action movie that I'd probably just enjoy it just on that. But I know everyone's like the pompousness and the ego of these films, but it's like, yeah, that's like his whole thing. I think it's a joke of the NWR at the beginning, which is supposed to be like a fashion designer. I don't really think he's going by NWR. I think that's a joke. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit. In 2 years when he's still going by that, I can tell myself to fuck off. But saying like he has a lot of ego in this film, that's the point. The stylization, that's the whole idea of what he's saying artistically, and I think he does that so beautifully in this film. As much as I'm like, he has kind of started to cut himself off from the modern film going world because these years are stacking up and he's stacking up these pictures that are divisive, and half the people seeing the movie were like breathing hard, like, oh, no one really expected him to make a weird horror atmospheric movie about the fashion industry. But that's kind of what's so cool about it. I guess in a way I am doing the auteurist kind of escape out and liking it just for that, but there's all sorts of reasons to like a movie. And I think for me, and someone who sees a lot of film, is I like seeing this kind of unique vision because there really is only one film like Neon Demon, and I guess I appreciate it for that, but it's not the kind of film I think I would enjoy or even recommend to someone who doesn't like Only God Forgives, don't see this movie. If you don't like Winning Refn in general, I don't even know what you're doing seeing this. You're a masochist, frankly. It's like such a small subdivision of people who would even be interested in this film. If you really like David Lynch and Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, hey, Neon Demon is the perfect movie for you. The Neon Demon is kind of just wonderful in its unique, bizarre vision of itself, but that's also why it will repel you, that it also wants to repel you, it also doesn't want you to like it, also doesn't want you to follow it in a traditional narrative sense, and that's kind of odd mixture might make you vomit all over the floor, or it might make you leave the theater and want to rewatch it again and analyze every image, and that's the whole package swirled together and splattered out on the screen in kind of a beautiful neon light Nicholas Winding Refn big auteurist picture that you can either love it or leave it, and I guess I'm just kind of okay with it going on. So if you have seen the Neon Demon and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.